demanding you make a deal with me, and nobody makes a deal with you. And then so you send out a letter, a strongly worded letter saying, hey, you should make a deal with me or else. So it's like, okay, dude, are you serious right now? You're supposed to be the president of the US. I'm curious on the Asian part of this though, like Japan, what was it? Japan, South Korea, and there was one other state, Malaysia, the state that I'm in, where he's talking about putting like 25% tariffs
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
all of these countries.
Yeah. It's Japan, South Korea, Malaysia is 25%, and Vietnam, I think, got 30%, or was it also 25%? And then the 40% and Laos and Myanmar. I'm like, what do Laos export to? What do Laos and Myanmar export to United States? I couldn't think of anything. But this is again, like on one hand, U.S. is trying to corral South Korea and Japan together to form this anti-China bandwagon, right? And on the other hand, they're slapping them with tariffs left and right. I mean, Japan already got slapped with the auto tariff, right? Because that actually is existential for Japanese automakers, because they are much more dependent on export than say China is, because China is okay, because China, they don't sell cars to the United States anyway, and China has the world's largest auto market, so China was okay. But Japan, they really depends on the U.S. market, and like that 25% tariff on foreign cars and foreign auto parts really gonna hurt, because despite having factory in the United States like Toyota, Nissan, Honda, large part, they still get a lot of parts from Japan, and Japanese Japanese trade delegates actually threatened that they could start selling U.S. Treasury, and this is
really.
Yeah, their Japanese are now playing hardball, because China now has set the example where they stood down Trump, and Trump voted. Now everybody is following suit, and the Japanese are saying, "Look, we if you're gonna, we're not gonna budge on this. You're gonna force this thing on us. We're gonna have to force to sell bonds." And let's remember, now it's Japan, not China, is the largest foreign holder of U.S. Treasuries, because China has already reduced their holding from 1.4 trillion to like 700 billion. So it's Japan that still hold somewhere north of $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury. And if they start selling, man, that's going to create havoc on the bond market. So let's see how Trump deal with that. And on the other hand, Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, they're actually sitting down with China to talk about this free trade pact among East Asia. And that's going to be like a free trade zone of 2 billion plus people. There's 1.4 billion people in China, 680 million people in ASEAN, 140 million people in Japan. And I think like 50 million in South Korea. So all together, more than 2 billion people market. I mean, that's huge. Wow. This is all thanks to Trump. This is all thanks to Trump, the great peacemaker. Give that guy a Nobel Peace Prize already.
Carl, it sounds like you were being sarcastic about my president. Saying that. Do you know that war criminal Netanyahu is putting his name in for the Nobel Peace Prize? I nearly fell out of my chair. But like the level of irony it's so thick and so over the top. My grandfather used to say, if I'm lying, God strike me dead. You would think at that moment God would have literally sent a thunderbolt down. It hit all of them. Just astonishing. I am curious, what do Asian countries think is going on in the mind of a president doing that? Because rational human being, rational man says, hey, if you do that, it's going to push people the bricks and push people to find a way around what you're doing in that moment, meaning you are making your situation worse. That's not, hey, let's go work with Trump. That's, hey, let's find a way to not work with the United States. Oh, I mean, how do they view it?
You
How
can't
does
work
China view it?
you know, you can't work with Trump. This is the guy. Trump in his first term, he signed the U.S. Canada Mexico trade agreement. Remember? And
Yeah.
now in his second term, he tore up the trade agreement he signed the first term with those two countries. How do you do business with somebody like that? This is his administration's trade pact. Now he decided to tore it up. So and this is why the Singaporean former diplomat Kishore Mubani has repeatedly said, please, United States, we in Southeast Asia do not want to be forced to have to choose between China and United States because we want to do business with both. But what he's really saying is, if push comes to shove, if you really force us, we're gonna have to choose China. And that's already happening. There's a recent article, I think, in Foreign Affairs magazine. It says the Southeast Asia is now starting to choose China, and they're moving closer and closer to China's position in terms of trade, in particular. This is because Trump is all big sticks, no carrots, and in comparison, it's like, why not just do business with China? When you do business with China, there's no string attached. For China, business is business. China's business is business. U.S. business is war. The choice is clear.
And is there anything that you can get out of the U.S. that you can't get from China?
China already make everything, sir.
That's what I mean.
Okay, NVIDIA chips. The NVIDIA still have, like, the AI chips. That's why they're talking about, U.S. is talking about sanction. Now they're threatening. They're thinking about sanctioning even the Middle East countries. They're trying to restrict the NVIDIA chip export to Middle East countries because they're suspecting Chinese firms are going to use a data center in Middle East to train their AI models. So and that's actually happening, by the way. I mean, there's reports. I don't know if it's true, but there's been reports of Chinese. They take they put their they carry suitcases with and they come to Southeast Asia. They use this, then they plug it into the data centers in Malaysia to use their NVIDIA chips that was already in place in the Malaysian data center. Train their AI models, unplug, put back in their suitcase, carry it back to China.
Oh, that's too funny.
Mean, people always find a way, man. I mean, Chinese people are resourceful. We have 2,000 years of experience of working around bureaucracy, working around imperial bureaucracy. Trump is nothing. This kind of Trump stuff is a piece of cake. They will find a way. Like, unless US do a global ban of NVIDIA chip export, China will find a way. They will find a way. I mean, right now Huawei is producing its own chips. From my talks with Chinese AI expert, they are there's the Huawei Ascend chips. There's still a small gap between Ascend chips and the H100 of NVIDIA. But so what they do is they use NVIDIA chip to train the model, and then they use the Ascend chip to actually run it to do so-called inference. That's when, like, when the model has already been trained, they just need to keep the service running. So for that, Huawei Ascend chip is sufficient. They only need NVIDIA chip for training purposes, and China they already stockpile whole ton loads of NVIDIA chip, before the ban. And now with the ban, they still can, take their suitcase, go to Malaysia data centers, plug it in, train their model, put it back in the suitcase, carry it back to China.
By the way, before I get to another important story, Is China still withholding, or at the very least, let's say slow rolling the rare earth minerals?
Okay, so there China. So what China put on rare earths is the export control, right? So what
Mhm.
export control means, anybody who want rare earth, they're gonna have to fill out an application, send it to the Chinese Commerce Ministry.
Oh,
What
geez,
China,
are you
yes,
serious?
what China said is they are now going to expedite the application approval process for American automakers, right? This is very specific, American automakers, because China don't want to cripple the U.S. economy, because there was a widespread panic among the U.S. auto industry captain of industry, because they're like, oh crap, we can't make cars if we don't get our hands on those heat resistant magnets that's made
Right.
from critical minerals. And so China's like, okay, so we will approve. They granted export license for U.S. car makers for 6 months, but after 6 months, they're due for renewal. They need to reapply, and in the meantime, China will monitor how they use those rare earth magnets. If they find them that get diverted for non-civilian use, diverted from like non-auto use, that can be cut off anytime. So so China still maintain the control on rare earth. The export control is still very much on. They
Yeah.
haven't lifted the ban on export to Lockheed Martin, for example. This is why the U.S. face a real bottleneck in their supply of missiles, production of F-35, all of which require those special heat-resistant magnets made from samarian cobalt. And people are saying, there's plenty of rare earth in United States, in Australia. We just need to scrap our environmental regulation and dig, baby, dig. Drill, baby, drill.
In 10
The
years,
thing
we
is,
have the supply that
yeah,
we need. Yeah.
yeah. The thing is actually not about digging it out of the earth. They could actually get that going in 3-4 years, no problem. The problem is refining. China actually
Mhm.
only mines 60% of the critical minerals, but they refine 90% of the critical minerals. So right now there's an MP mine in the United States that's been mining critical earth. But you know what happened after they dug out of the earth
They're
in
sending to
US?
China.
They send it to China for processing, because only China has the machine tools and technology to refine those rare earth into those heat resistant magnets. And all that, because what happened was, back in the 1980s, United States and a lot of European firms decided, mining the rare earth is just too polluting. We don't want that. Let's
Right.
offsource our pollution to third world countries. At that time, China was desperately poor, so they said, "Okay, we'll
We'll
take
do
it.
it.
We'll literally do the dirty job." But China always had an eye on moving up the value chain. So you know what? We're going to do the refining too. And at that time, United States was perfectly fine. Wall Street did their calculations, like, oh, there's not much margin in refining. Yeah. It's a lot easier just to have the refining done in China. So U.S. actually help China to set up those refining processes. They send the plan, their technology over. And this is how, but after the 80s, 90s, China started to dominate this industry. But what happened now, it's 40 years later. There have been
Yeah.
2 generations of evolution of those technology in refining. The technology that's making those heat resistant magnet today is not the same as refining rare earth back in 1980s. And
Yeah.
all the latest technology and refining process, all that IP is controlled by China. This is why even if they can scrap all the environmental regulation and start digging in United States, Australia, they still can resolve the bottleneck, which is refining. That's where
Wow.
China still has the chokehold. And this is why there's a lot of, US have been talking about it since 2008. Now it's 2025. They haven't done anything. They haven't
Too late.
make any
God,
headway
it's so
in
insane.
decades. So
The
I don't
idea.
expect this. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the idea that our military is relying upon a country who we define as an enemy. I mean, granted, it doesn't have to define it as an enemy. They choose to make it an enemy. But you've allowed yourself to become dependent on that, which is mind-blowing to me. But that's the, what do you say, capitalists will sell you the rope you use to hang them with?
Exactly.
Here we are.
Exactly. I mean, China didn't, China only put the export control on after United States slapped the chip sanction against China. It's a tit for tat. I mean, like, United States didn't have to put those chip sanctions on China, but right now, for some reason, all these Silicon Valley tech bros thinks that we have to put those chip sanctions in place because we have to make sure we get to develop Terminator and Skynet first. So China will be screwed. So we have to put those chip sanctions. So here we are.
Carl, I want to hit another very important story before we close. Where do I find this bar? This bar is very important to me in this moment.
It's in Hangzhou, China.
I was laughing my ass off at this because I think you pointed out that everybody always thinks that this is from Japan. And it's, I think what it is we don't have this view of China in that way, like where they're dancing girls. It just doesn't occur to us. It's like, that's something that you find in Japan, not China.
Yeah, because like, in the American imagination, Japan is a place where it's kind of cool and a little weird, sometimes, just kind of out there, that's kind of perception. Whereas, their perception of China is still like coolie hats, rice field, water buffalo, I don't know, bicycles, or like people working on making iPhones, right?
Right.
Because they don't know anything else. That's all their media exposure. And like the fact that people say, oh, that's because, we can't tell the difference between Japan, China, and Korea. I mean, fair. I mean, that's fair, because there's a lot of similarity between East Asian cultures, a lot of cross-cultural borrowing. But guess what? They never do the reverse. They never find some interesting videos from Japan and Korea and label it China.
Right. Yeah.
So it's always like that meme where people do the soy face when it comes to Japan, like, oh, Japan and China. It's like, oh. No.
Yeah, I don't think they know. As Americans, I don't think we know. I think it's kind of like Africa, like where.
Like everybody think Africa is a country, right? In US, everybody think Africa is one country.
Well, there's that, but also this idea that everybody in Africa, like meaning, and I'm talking about the entirety of the continent, is from like a Sally Struthers commercial of these potbelly kids. Like I don't think like
that's absolutely true. I experienced that. I went to Caltech back in late 90s. There was we had a Kenyan exchange student in our class, and one of our residential counselor asked him, "Oh, do you guys wear shoes? Like, do you guys like?" I was like, "Oh, that's so man." He came to Caltech, dude. He's an exchange student at Caltech, man. How do you think he got here? You think he swam across the ocean? I mean, like, come on, like, of course, he was thinking like all these East African marathon runner, right? Like they run without shoes and stuff like that. But still, come on, like Google, like I think we already had Google back then. Just Google like a picture of Nairobi or something, like
that's so
like
racist.
They're not, because people's image of Africa is still mud huts, loincloth, and it's ridiculous.
I'm glad you said Nairobi because Nairobi is like a big city in Africa.
Yeah.
And I remember when my ex-wife and I remember her and I realized, hey, we have some racist ideas about Africa. Like we weren't even including it in places that we traveled. And at some point we were like, well, let's do Kenya. Nairobi is a big city. It's a big city.